Hi, Bren Murphy here. This morning I wanted to share some reflections I have on bullying, which is an external criticism that you attract to yourself, and the internal criticism, which is the inner critic that you put on yourself and you give yourself. Okay, so it's bullying from an external source is attracted and can be sort of avoided by avoiding that environment or those toxic people, but far more powerful is the inner critic that accompanies you sort of every day, everywhere, and you're trying to work out how to sort of stop being so hypercritical, judgmental and comparing and sort of self-sabotaging. How I started talking about this topic today was just reflecting on how people interact. I've just been doing some business and just seeing how people interact with each other, and phrases like "don't get your hopes up," just how massively, overwhelmingly critical and defeating and self-sabotaging just that phrase is when people say that, or the sort of expectation that things are in decline, or that the government has no money, or that there's like a scarcity or a lack, like in the whole economy or the whole environment or the whole country or the whole globe. Things like that, when you bring them back to a micro scale, are just where people are, their own inner critic limits them to do anything or pursue anything. And again, it can be just a massive guise of just under the guise of fear. And so you prefer to better the devil you know. That's another classic saying, where people will sort of tolerate a real ordinariness and a real not good enough sort of current situation and let it persist and do nothing to change it, because they've sort of resigned to the feeling that this is as good as it gets, or better the devil you know, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that kind of mentality. So it's not about that. What we're about is accepting responsibility for where we are now and doing steps, having the awareness to know what we can control and what we can't control, and those elements and factors we can control, or at least have an input in, or at least massage or sculpt or guide or align or nudge in some direction to make life less of a struggle, less resistant, less pushback, more open, more free, more in the flow, more satisfying and more fulfilling and meaningful. That's the angle we're taking, that's the approach we take and I'm taking. So, and in doing that, it's important to emotionally detach from the outcome. So when you do take this sort of path, it's critical that you don't overinvest in it and become to the point where you're a setback or a delay or some negative feedback can be really devastating and can really crush your motivation and have you reflecting at night going, maybe I'm not cut out for this, maybe I'm not meant to be it, or your inner critic kicks in and says, see, I told you, you're never going to be good at, for example, public speaking. See, I told you, you weren't meant to be a surfer. So I told you, this family has never been good at acting. Things like that. That's where your inner critic just chips in at the last moment. So in the rough and tumble of life, you'll be rolling along. And if that inner critic is just poised, waiting just behind your shoulder to go, told you, it's never going to work. That's an inner critic. And that's what we have to be, have the awareness to know that the inner critic will only arrive at moments of vulnerability or exhaustion or fatigue or loneliness, or when you've been emotionally attached to something and it hasn't panned out exactly as you imagined. And that's when you have to have that last reserve of resilience to tell the inner critic to back off, or just be able to recognize it as it being an inner critic and to sort of tone it down. Or another great idea is to visualize toning down the volume. So the inner critic, the chatter can be there, but you can't hear the volume. So that was a massive point. Another part was just to be yourself and realize that out of 100 people or 100%, there's going to be a percentage that just do not engage or do not like your style or your method or colour of your hair or the way you part your hair or your conversation style, things like that. So that's going to happen. You will meet with rejection if you put yourself out there, and again, being resilient and being able to bounce back is crucial, is critical. But again, part of the resilience and part of what drives you onward is your passion. Critical, I'm using that word a lot today, critical. Another really valid point I picked up this morning when I was in my yoga class. The yoga teacher said, as we were doing a difficult twist, he said, don't let your ambition override your joy or take the joy out of the moment, which was really powerful for me to go that sometimes I do overreach, or I literally overreach into a fold or a bend, and my ambition to make the pose can take the joy of yoga from that moment, and it becomes about striving and struggling and grasping and clutching instead of breathing into a pose and accepting me for all my limits and imperfections and age and weaknesses and strengths and things like that, and just accepting me for who I am. So accepting me for being myself. And the final thing today on the idea of the inner critic and bullying is you do, how I mentioned earlier about how you attract bullying, which can be pretty devastating if you're being bullied, to say, hey, I don't attract bullying. Well, you can attract bullying, and a key signal for bullies is your posture. So if you're going around with your head down, hunched shoulders, kicking stones, you can present as a victim. How do you think the bully, who is a predator, picks a bullying victim out of the herd? It's through, at a distance, it's through posture. So maintaining a nice, confident, shoulders back, open your heart, open this vulnerable triangle between your shoulders and your sternum here. That's your vulnerability area. Open it up and confidently present that to the world as though you have nothing to fear, because you do not have anything to fear. And just your posture itself should be enough to radiate that energy that says you're not to be bullied. You're not one to, you won't respond to bullying. You won't pick up the other end of the rope. There's another great analogy there, was that the bully is like pulling one end of the rope in a tug of war. And if you don't pick up the other end and play the victim to the bully is just pulling one end of the rope, and it's sort of goes, oh, okay, I have to move on. And it does have the idea that accepting bullies will always be, but just that ideally they won't be targeting you or your family or your children or your spouse or something. So just by presenting as a non-victim, you will not be preyed upon by predators. Okay, it's a difficult topic, working with the inner critic and externally working with bullying, but it's a key part just to have that inner peace, because your inner peace you can work so hard to cultivate it on a personal level, and then it can be shattered by some peanut bully who just comes out of nowhere. So that's what we're doing, and we want to cultivate our own inner peace, but also be not radiating an energy that attracts bullies or that negative energy. Okay, thanks a lot. It's Bren Murphy from thepersonalcoach.com.au.